And so there's a lot of considerations when it comes to getting a pleco and deciding what of the 1,026 species, although not all are available in the trade, which one to choose. But today I'm going to talk about ones that you probably don't want and maybe some alternatives to these. So probably the first one I'm going to start with is Ancistrus, and this includes the gold nugget pleco, the mango pleco, which is also known as magnum pleco. So that's Ancistrus xanthellus, Ancistrus chrysolamus, and generally I'm restricting this to the true Ancistrus. So that does include L142, which is the proper large snowball, but also Ancistrus niveatus, which I've never seen in the trade anyway. So what's the issue with Ancistrus? They're very striking fish as juveniles, but that's part of the problem. These fishes have very specialist herbivorous algivorous diets that generally most diets for in captivity don't cater to. They are constantly feeding, so they need a lot of, well, generally very expensive food. And this makes them a little bit more of a consideration than maybe other species. And they won't clean the algae off your tanks. That is probably a massive myth, and that algae is very different to what they'd feed on in the wild, because in the wild they'd be feeding on bacteria, fungi, sponges, bryozoa, as well as the algae, but a wider diversity of algae. The next thing is temperature. These fishes need high temperatures, 28 degrees minimum. That cuts out a lot of fishes. And along with their dietary specialisms, it cuts out even more fishes. They are slow feeders, they won't compete well with other fishes, and it's highly likely any leftover food from other fishes that might not be designed for them probably might get eaten, and that might cause bloat. Whereas their food that they get put in they might get out competed for, and this is generally the major issues of them. They are very territorial, and it does increase with age. They are bulky fishes, and they could do a lot of damage to each other and other fishes of similar body shapes. So that includes other plecos, potentially even other like similar ones like loaches. But the main issue with this is the resulting size. These are big fishes. Adults around 30 centimetres including tail length. That's including the gold nugget. That can grow that big. But let's scroll through the internet and see how many adults there are. There's very few. And you can tell they're not adults because firstly they mostly have the seams. Adults have minimal to maybe a patch of gold on the dorsal and the caudal fin. But they generally just look like a snowball pleco, or more like the L142. This does mean that what you're buying in captivity as a juvenile looks very different to the adult, and even as a sub-adult or even as a juvenile, those seams, those bright seams on the dorsal and the caudal fin will disappear. So it's a big consideration. There is an extremely low success rate. I don't know anyone that's managed to actually grow theirs out from a small size to an adult, and there's less than double digits of any of these species breeding in captivity. And Ancistrus chrysolamus, the magnum, has never been bred in captivity. I believe a few other of the xanthellus haven't, and L142 I'm not sure. There's quite a few species that aren't seen in captivity. So this is a species with a low success rate, even with people that have a lot of experience and knowledge with these type of fishes, and therefore I do not recommend them. But what about solutions? What's similar in appearance that might be better off? And especially when it comes to size. So the best one I think for compared to the gold nugget would be Ancistrus acerini. There's a lot of Ancistrus mentioned here in the genus name or genre names. Ancistrus acerini has these spots, these gold spots, and does have these seams as well. It is a flatter bodied fish. It's actually found in the Rio Xingu as well. but it's a lot more hardy. It does prefer those higher temperatures and does best at those higher temperatures, but it's a lot more adaptable. It will feed on a wider range of diets. It doesn't get so big and it doesn't need so much food. It doesn't have issues with as many diets as Ancistrus will. They're a lot more easier to grow out, and I wouldn't be surprised if they have been bred in captivity. I have also seen colour changes in them, but this will not stay for long, so it's best not to buy them when you see one that's got aspects of xanthism, or is it recurrent colour change. No one really knows the cause. I think it's more viral, but or just xanthism, but don't focus on that. But what about others? So Ancistrus has plenty of very boldly spotted individuals that will hold those spots, unlike Ancistrus xanthellus, the gold nugget. You got Ancistrus L201, which is a very small, cheap species that holds its spots. It's quite striking and it holds that striking appearance a lot longer. It's adaptable to a wider range of temperatures. I've kept them lower than 28 easily, although most hypens tend to do better at that. And there are many other spotted Ancistrus. Ancistrus contradens is probably another good example of that. But what about the green coloration of Ancistrus Ancistrus chrysolemus, the mango, the magnum? How can I get that? Well, Ancistrus subviridis is probably the best alternative. This is the green phantom, and there are two green phantoms. It's important to distinguish the two. There's the high fin green phantom, which, despite the name, that fin doesn't really differ between the normal green phantom, which is Ancistrus subviridis, and the high fin, which is Ancistrus demantoides. Ignore the genus name. They are more closely related than Ancistrus demantoides is to any other Ancistrus, apart from begging eye, which is likely in the same position. They look practically exactly the same. The only difference is a membrane between the dorsal and the adipose fin. So you get this green coloration, especially in Ancistrus subviridis. They are still a bigger fish. They get to around 24 centimetres including the tail, about 18 centimetres standard length, and they're a lot easier to feed. They are again algivores. They do better at higher temperatures, but they're a lot more adaptable and a lot easier to keep and a lot more forgiving. Generally, you'll see the difference in the price. Ancistrus subviridis tends to be around 30 to 40 pounds. Might have gone up by now. Ancistrus demantoides will be around the 60 plus mark. Normally, there are many exceptions, so look for that membrane between the dorsal fin and the adipose fin, and that'll be different. But there you could get that really vivid green coloration. And Ancistrus subviridis, if you don't want vivid, you could go for darker, lighter, and also blue, because they are found within the Rio Orinoco, and their coloration differs depending on where they're found in the river. And also at the top is L128, which is the blue phantom, and potentially the same species, potentially not. I guess depends on your definition of species. So let's go on to the other fish to avoid, and this is going to be a lot shorter because I can rant for days about Ancistrus. So this is Acanthicus. The main issue with Acanthicus is these are gigantic. They are debatably the largest of the loricarids, competing with Pseudacanthicus major, which also grows to around 50 centimetre standard length according to papers. But Acanthicus has records of them going to 1 metre standard length in, I believe it's Acanthicus adonis. You can buy Acanthicus adonis for reasonable prices at very small size. There's even albinos. But the issue is this small, striking spotted fish doesn't stay that way. It will lose its spots pretty early on. They are known for aggression. They are sharp. So imagine keeping it with a ray or even loaches that could easily get scratched up. Loaches, if they want to wedge in that same cave, they could get scratched if they want brushed past it. These are fish you need gloves for. But that size is the main thing. These are monsters. And whatever people say about common plecos, this is a striking species that sells because it's got the rare, decorative, fancy pleco tag, but it grows a lot larger, it's a lot more nasty, and I generally avoid instead. So there's different selections depending on what size tank. And of course I'll go down the same sort of route with Ancistrus as an alternative. Yes, it does best at higher temperatures, but they are adaptable. Dietary wise with Ancistrus, these are fishes that are mostly algivores, detritivores in the wild. They feed a lot of algae, seeds, plant matter, detritus. Minimal insect love. I only found one record if you watched the video I've done on Ancistrus diets. But in captivity they're fed sort of a more omnivorous, generalist, carnivorous even diet, and they adapt to a degree, but more because those diets aren't true carnivores. So there are plenty of others with that white and black spotting coloration generally, but does tend to go of age. You've also got Ancistrus has many members with the white and black spotting. Alternatively, there is Pseudacanthicus L97, which grows to, I'd say, under 30 centimetres easily. I'm trying to visualise it because obviously most are standard length. This is a Pseudacanthicus, so it is aggressive. It is a carnivore. This makes it a lot more easier to feed in captivity. It's a lot easier to get a range into a carnivore's diet than it is to a herbivore's diet, because vegetables are nothing like what the herbivores are eating in the wild. But it doesn't get quite so big, and that means you could potentially work it into a sort of a larger tank if you want something for a larger tank, but doesn't get monstrous and isn't going to get so bad. They are sharp being Pseudacanthicus. The other Pseudacanthicus has a hefty price tag. This is Pseudacanthicus serratus. So I've sold them at about £70 for juvenile, so that's about that big. They can be white spotted on a black background. They can be solid black. If you want the goth fish, that is Pseudacanthicus serratus. But it depends. Some hold spots, some don't. It's a varied species from Suriname. But adults, they will cost a lot more. And I think I saw, it was either £500 or £700 for a pair, but that was for adults from Suriname a long time ago. But then if you think about it, you're paying about £100 for Acanthicus adonis, £50 for Acanthicus adonis, and it grows to something like, let's say, 1 metre 50, 1 metre. You're going to need a lot larger tank than you are for Pseudacanthicus serratus, and the cost for tanks is a lot more than that sort of money you're going to save from getting a larger fish that's cheap, if you get what I mean. Because that sort of difference, it's like Pseudacanthicus serratus is like half, quarter, third of the size, so you're going to need a lot smaller tank, and it gives you a lot more option, I think. Well, a lot makes sense monetarily, really. You're going to need hundreds rather than thousands of litres, but definitely not in like 200, 300 litres. I'll go a lot larger with Pseudacanthicus serratus. But there is so many options when you want that white and black spots that actually hold. Because Acanthicus, it doesn't. These fish look leggy as hell as they age. So let's see, is it last one? No. Second to last one is Panak. People love Panak, but there's two flaws with Panak. Panak grows big. Panak also produces a lot of waste. So Panak is a genus, it's a well-known one. These are the royal plecos. These are the heavy-bodied, floating head-looking ones. But they grow big, and they often lose their markings as they age. Often you look at the adults, you're like, blimey, they all look the same. Why did I pay a few hundreds more for that when it looks the same as this? There is one exception. Panak bathyphilus only grows to 30 centimetres standard length, which including the tail and the trailers, you're looking at sort of like 40 centimetres, 50 centimetres, because Panak trailers can get long, and I'd let them grow because they look nice. You don't want to basically prevent them growing by, I guess, damaging them enough they never grow back and it's a scar or so. But the rest of Panak nigrolineatus, Panak arbustii, these are your common sort of royals. Some aren't though. I think is it Panak arbustii, the Riozinga is a lot less common. And also there's variants on this. Nigrolineatus is also the watermelon, royal watermelon pleco. 40 centimetre standard length plus tail. This is a big fish and they are deep, so it's gonna need a substantial tank. Not just that, but there's bigger. Panak bathyphilus, which is the smaller one I mentioned, is often used to sell, the name is often used to sell Panak shafari. Shafari grows to, I think it's 60 centimetres standard length. 60 centimetres. That is going to reach a metre, including the tail probably, or maybe 90 centimetres. It's a big fish. It's heavy. Could you lift it up with your hands? I don't know. You need gloves anyway because they're going to be sharp. Well, more rough. I wouldn't say they're anything like Acanthicus. So that like flashes, I think. So this is just a big fish. Panak cotyledon, or sometimes sold as Panak sartoni, which is the blue eye. They're still big fish, and along with that they produce a lot of waste. Big fish, lot of waste. No other species of lollicurrid I think compares in waste levels. So I'd avoid. They are pretty unique in a way, but there are, well, there's alternatives. So what's the solution? If you've got a small tank, why not go for the mini Panaks? This is Panaculus. You got Panaculus albivermis, which is the flash pleco. Panaculus albimaculatus, that is a fish that is dark background, white yellowishy spots. They get lovely tail filaments. They get under 20 centimetres, 15 centimetres. They're maybe a bit more elongate. You've also got, what's it, Panak, well, if you want the same body shape, but definitely not going to grow as big, Panak AF Macus, L002, Panak Tanaki, all of those sort of, and I find the more elongate the Panaculus. Did I say Panak for the whole thing? I mean the Panaculus, Macus, Panaculus, Tanaki, that lot, L002, L397. They're all great selections. They got similar body shape, but I find the deeper body, shorter ones, rather than the elongate ones, produce a lot less waste. The elongate ones still produce waste, and I've got a whole video on their diets. They are detritivores, which makes them extremely adaptable, as are Panaks. Panaks, being bigger and the potential to grow bigger, need a lot more food, whereas Panaculus is a lot more adaptable and you could keep in much smaller tanks. And they have been more commonly bred in captivity, but still are a real challenge. Ancistrus, if you want something to breed, they can be great fun. A lot of people have bred them, and they're, I would say, as easy as the common bristlenose almost. Depends on the species to a degree. Not to mention this, as an alternative to Panak, you have Hypostomus, and Hypostomus has a genus, well, there used to be a genus called Cotyledon, it's now in Hypostomus. These look almost the same as Panak in body shape. You got Panak Cotyledon, Sonne, which is the blue-eyed Hypostomus, blue-eyed, what's it? Blue-eyed, oh blimey. But these are basically, they have a very similar trophic niche. I don't find they produce as much waste. There's also Chimera, Basilisco, but they're a great solution. They can be a lot harder to find, but if you can find them. So they're sort of your mid-range. They will get to around sort of, I've not seen many of them larger than 30 centimetres. There are some more striking species, like within that group that are like solid grey or yellowish grey, then is it black spots? But they're well worth looking at, and you can't really search them up via Cotyledon, but they're deeper bodied hypostomus that are well worth looking at. So the final one, this is the one that I would say avoid, because they have been bred in captivity. There is success with them, but it's with very few people. So this is Ancistrus ranunculus, probably the most unique lorocarid, or the most unique Ancistrus on the market. Avoid. They need to be in groups, so your 30 to 50 pound fish, this includes L255, will become a 200 to 300 pound fish, because they don't seem to even survive. They don't want to feed on their own, so you have to get multiples. And I don't think getting Ancistrus macrophthalmus or other Ancistrus compares. Ancistrus macrophthalmus may be a bit more because they're a lot more social, and common bristlenose, that common bristlenose is territorial. High temperatures, 28 degrees minimum, I would go above. That means you need to like ramp up that oxygen, you need a lot of flow. They're fussy with diets, probably well worse than Ancistrus, because these guys will not touch food unless it's the right food, and that right food is with Pachysaur and green. That's the only thing I've managed any success with so far that I haven't tried. I am trying to make fish food, but I'm not gonna really talk about that too much. So that makes them extremely annoying to keep in captivity. They have a really low success rate, and very few people keep them, and I would say it is easily single digits of people I know with success. They like plenty of hiding places, and they will not compete with other fish. If there is other fish taking that food, they're not going to ram past it, push it out the way. They're just going to sit there and be like, no. So they do take a lot of work, and your tank probably isn't going to be this pristine thing. They like it dark, they like black caves, they like the diet, the high temperatures. They need to be social. They're a lot more of a sort of undertaking, and they are probably one of the most challenging species of loricarids, of fish to keep in captivity. And I would say Ancistrus xanthellus, Ancistrus chrysonomus for the same reason. They are not easy to keep, and you need to do tons of research. For ranunculus, I had to go into journals because I couldn't find the solution to the problems elsewhere, which makes it a lot more difficult, even because you have to actually be able to understand and dissect journals. So what about selections? The first one, Ancistrus macrophthalmus, needs the same care, but they're a lot more forgiving. So one mistake won't cause a massive issue. They're a lot more forgiving with flow, with temperature, with diet. But I would aim to keep them like ranunculus, and definitely keep them socially, but they're a lot more forgiving in that aspect. They can be spotty sometimes, and they can hold on to their spots, but generally not. Even with ranunculus, those spots, very few individuals hold on to them. That's why I know certain individuals, because I know which ones are spotted. But the best alternatives for Ancistrus ranunculus would be Ancistrus dolichopaterus, which is the starlight pleco. It has 8 to 9 soft dorsal rays. It has a white seam. It might hold that seam, it might not. It might hold the spots, it might not. But it's a dark fish. They can grow to a good size. Definitely ranunculus is a big fish. I've got one I used for CT scanning, like that. That is a big fish. And there's been larger caught in the wild. The only reason you see large ones in captivity really is either someone's really good with them, which is rare, or they've been imported that way. Unlike Ancistrus xanthellus, it's economically viable to import large ones, whereas Ancistrus, so if it gives you a sort of idea, Like you can buy a baby Barons, it's just about that big, for about 30. One about that big, about 100 and something, 160 I think I paid for my large female Chrysolamus. And then there was one I think about that maybe, and that was 200. That's not trade price. I don't know trade price because I imported, well, the store I worked at and did the orders for included my male, one of my males. The other alternative is L107. This is the brilliant bristlenose, brilliant starlight bristlenose. It's a little bit wider bodied. It holds on to what is dark, it's dark coloration, but also it's got white spots, and it is a great alternative. It's easy to breed, as is Dolichopterus, and they're easy to keep in captivity. They're a lot more forgiving, even though they are more algivores. So that kind of completes my list. There's many more. Lorcards have easy and challenging, well, moderate and challenging, because they have they have a high mortality in captivity, so obviously they're not that easy. These are fish that can live for a long time, so you're keeping quite sensitive species, and they might not live, they should live a long time, but they might not, because one slip up and that's all it takes sometimes, especially with oxygen and the higher temperature species. If flow cuts out or something does, it can go wrong quite quickly. Anyway, thank you for watching and goodbye.